you put so much into everything else that it's like everything else has to feel good before you can feel good. But then also, how do I change that? So I feel like to some degree, it's still a work in progress. I mean, like you said, I'm juggling a lot of things, but that also brings me joy, I think. Like I said, I like the idea of paying it forward and helping people. And if I can be of service to others, including my children or my neighbors or a family member, that does fill my cup.
So Sarah and I have been talking a lot about, school needs, having boards and being part of the board and all it takes. So not only Sarah being a head of school and working with the board, she also is a parent of 2 children. So Sarah, tell us a little bit about how you got yourself into the Montessori journey and how old are your children now?
Yeah, great questions. So my children, I have 2 children. I have a 9-year-old boy and I have an 11-and-a-half-year-old daughter. And they're both still in Montessori since birth. I like to think in utero, but they've held steady and they're still taking it in at school and at home. In terms of my journey, I guess it goes way back to 40 some years ago. I actually went to Montessori as a child. I believe I started in Chicago where I was born, and then we moved to Detroit and I went to Montessori there. And I only did primary, so I stopped around 5 maybe. And then as I was graduating college many years later, I got a letter in the mail to do a Montessori training that had a master's program. And I figured, great, all in one swoop. I'm going to get this amazing training and get a master's degree. Yeah, it was day one I was sold. I took my primary training. So that was in 99. I taught primary for several years. And then I went back to do the assistance to infancy training. And then left there and taught for a couple years with toddlers, and then kind of flip-flop between primary and toddlers, and then decided I wasn't finished and I needed to go to Italy to take the elementary training to get, one, to see Italy, obviously, but then to get the full picture. I was really curious and interested about children from birth through elementary. So I did that. That was probably over the course of maybe 11 years, 12 years, something like that. And while I was in Italy, actually, I had a couple parents reach out to me and we decided in a very short time, maybe a week, that we would start a school. It was very naive, but very serendipitous and amazing. And so I founded the Delray Montessori School in Alexandria, Virginia. And that was, I guess, in 2011. I like to tell people it was my first child. My daughter was born in 2013. So the school was my first child. And as you can imagine, it takes a lot of work. So I compare it to birthing a child, quite frankly. And then after that, you mentioned at some point, I think that I'm a consultant. I work with AMI USA as a consultant at the primary level. So I get to travel throughout the US and visit schools, which is lovely. And then just last summer, so this past June, I stepped down from my position as the head of school and decided I wanted to do something different and launched a couple businesses. I started a private consulting business for Montessori, obviously, because that's like my whole life. And while I was doing that, I saw a need for supporting leaders, really. So supporting administrators. One of my experiences as a head of school was that it doesn't matter how many great people you never have enough help. So my goal, I opened a Montessori virtual assistant, which is just that, a virtual assistant to help with all the tasks that need help with, right? And I'm virtual, so it works. And then this past October, when I was trying to launch those 2 businesses, I had a colleague who's the head of school at a school in DC reach out and ask me to join as their admissions director. So now I'm the admissions director at Aiden Montessori School in DC. And I have these side businesses and I work for AMI USA and I'm a mom, a single mom, like you said. And so I'm like bopping all over the place. And I don't know, I want to say figuring out life, but figuring out myself and trying to be useful and trying to be helpful and trying to pay it forward because, it took a long time to get where I was and where I am. And I had a lot of really phenomenal people support me along the way. So my hope is to pay that forward and to support people as they go into their own journey.
Yeah, that's lovely. And I think you're going to be able to do that through this podcast, encourage others who are also on their journey. And I think we're all on a journey of some sort together. Sarah, we've been talking about your background. You seem to be doing this well because you've practiced that skill for a while. So let's talk about balancing family and leadership because you actually have a lot of knowledge and you've taken all of these courses and have the training, and now you're actually implementing all of those. Now you're a single mom of an 11-and-a-half-year-old, you said, and a son who is 9. How do you balance the demands of parenting and the responsibility of leading your job duties plus all the desires that you have because you're constantly creating?
That's a very great loaded question, which sometimes I feel I fail at miserably, and then others, yay, that's what we want to hear, right? But the truth, like it's hard, and it doesn't allow me, it forces me to figure out how I'm going to do it, right? So as you were asking the question, it's funny because I've been thinking about this question for months, and I feel like if you'd asked me back in December, it might be different. But as I was listening to you, I was thinking about the Montessori and how my kids are 9 and 11 now. And because they have experience in Montessori, and because since birth, they've been in my home being participatory in all the activities, now I don't have to do as much as I once did, right? So my children can make meals. They can make breakfast, lunch, and dinner. And my daughter, last week I walked in on my daughter at breakfast time on a school day using a hand mixer to put whipped cream that she made from scratch on her coffee. So these things were like, I never taught her how to do that. I don't do that. I don't have time for that in my balance, right? But I think this lifestyle, this Montessori lifestyle that I live and I embrace and embody, it's what my children are used to. So I think much of it is they've journeyed with me in practical life skills, I guess you could say, right? So taking care of themselves, taking care of the household, participating when they can, and really inviting them to do that. But obviously that's not all of it because they're only 9 and 11. And, it's taken me years to get where I am. I mean, I think it's really difficult. And I think, leadership in general is really difficult. And when you think of a village, if you're lacking that, it makes it more difficult, right? So I think it's being highly organized. I think that's a part of it. If I didn't have a Google Calendar, I would lose my mind. I don't know how people did it 20 years ago, but it's also prioritizing and putting the things first that are important. And I feel like as a woman, as a single mother, as a leader, you often get sucked into everybody else's responsibilities and not your own. So I can honestly tell you the last several years, I haven't done a great job of taking care of myself because there's been fires all around me. And maybe not fires, maybe that's dramatic, but you put so much into everything else that it's like everything else has to feel good before you can feel good. But then also, how do I change that? So I feel like to some degree, it's still a work in progress. I mean, like you said, I'm juggling a lot of things, but that also brings me joy, I think. Like I said, I like the idea of paying it forward and helping people. And if I can be of service to others, including my children or my neighbors or a family member, then that's, that does fill me. That does fill my cup.